Hey class, welcome to segment 5, the second to last segment of the semester. So this segment is pretty lengthy. It's 4 weeks, and it's actually the biggest segment in terms of percentage for the entire course. It's 30%. So just to give you some context in terms of kind of the scope of this and how much work you kind of need to put into it. So I want to start with that. So for the first 4 segments, I've been going pretty good. For most of you, you guys are able to understand the genres that I'm asking you to do, to integrate what's going on in Markel with what's going on in Hager, and doing your own research. I am asking a lot of you this semester because that is my approach for online teaching. I don't just want to turn it into complete this activity and submit it on Blackboard and just kind of the kind of more rote, kind of dry approach. So I know putting you guys in these kind of weird situations with historical books and contemporary technical writing theory is asking a lot of you, but I just want to say that so far you guys have been doing really well and I'm very impressed. And I'm excited to see what you guys come up with segment 5, this week's segment. So I would advise that if you haven't yet, read the assignment description. Read the assignment description first before watching the video. I think generally that's good. I'm not sure if I mentioned that yet, but you guys have probably picked up on that anyway because I've been referencing it. I'll reference the assignment descriptions in the video. So read the assignment description first and then watch this video. And if you already have read it, then you know that it's broken up into 2 segments. So it's a 4-week segment in the sense that it begins today and it goes for 4 weeks. But there's this, but about halfway through you'll be submitting your proposal, and then I'll give you feedback on it, and then I'll kind of give you the blessing. I'll give you the go-ahead to go ahead and make your infographic. So let me go into detail about that. So there are 2 phases to the project. So the first one is a proposal. In the proposal, you're going to have to, unsurprisingly, propose to me your idea for an infographic as it relates to nitrogen pollution. So that's the connection between the Hager text. So in chapter 22, Hager talks about the contemporary effects of Haber-Bosch and their technology, specifically fixed nitrogen runoff through agriculture and farming, which is a big pollutant today. Not necessarily in the air, the effects on the air aren't quite, I guess, clear just yet, but in terms of water pollution, it's pretty clear that places even as close as Chesapeake Bay in our backyard have what's called dead zones, where nitrogen will pollute water like the Gulf of Mexico or Chesapeake Bay or Baltic Sea or all these bodies of water where there's a lot of runoff from farming and agriculture. And they'll create these dead zones that's killing a lot of the ecosystem that it's a part of. So what I want to do, because segment 6 is about resumes and cover letters and stuff like that, this is really the last segment that has to do with Hager. So I wanted to make sure that we're focusing kind of the so what element of the book, right? So when you read a science writing book, you're like, wow, that's a really fascinating narrative about, the scientific progress and Nazism and how scientific inquiry relates to political strife and personal struggles and psychology. And that's really fascinating. But ultimately, I think it's also useful to say, okay, so what? So what's the effect of that technology today? And chapter 22 in Hager goes over that. And that's what the focus of this is going to be. So I'm having you guys write a proposal. A proposal is a very common genre in technical writing. You can propose to get funding for research. You can propose to become the person who gets that contract with the vendor or whatever it is, or you propose something to deliver goods and then you get selected. Even a college application essay is kind of a form of a proposal because you're making an argument like, hey, choose me. I understand what college life is like and I'm capable of succeeding in this context. That's probably the closest thing that most of you have written to a proposal in case unless you're in the military or a workplace that actually asks you to maybe, I don't know, work with contractors or subcontractors or vendors or delivery of goods or anything like that. So you guys are proposing to me, I'm your audience, you guys are proposing to me an idea for an infographic and that communicates the risk of nitrogen pollution to the public. So my estimation is that most people, while they're aware that Chesapeake Bay is polluted, they typically think of it in terms of trash. There's like a lot of trash cleanups with Chesapeake Bay. If you're from this area, you might be familiar with that. Chesapeake Bay Foundation is pretty keen on that. But people are probably less aware of the effect of nitrogen on our waterways and our bays and our basins and all these other things. So that's what you have to communicate. And I go into more detail in the assignment description. You have to communicate that risk to the public. And as I mentioned in the description, the way the communication of risk typically works is it's not really effective if you just splatter facts at them, right? That's clearly, time and time again, it's 21st century and we're still coping with a lot of problems because facts don't persuade. Stories persuade. Visuals persuade, right? Emotions persuade. So what you start to see is there's a lot of infographics, particularly on Facebook. They go viral, or you share, or you have that really political person on your Facebook newsfeed that's always sharing these infographics, specifically with the political climate that we're in right now, as a way to engage people, as a way to connect them to their narrative, as a way to make it relevant to them. We've kind of started on this infographic phase, especially because there's so many technologies out there now that allows the layperson to create these pretty nice looking infographics. So you will propose an infographic to me, and then you have to give that proposal to me by April 7th. You can submit it anytime before. You can submit it 2 days from now, a week from now, whenever. But as long as it's before April 7th, I will review your proposal, and I will let you know if you can go ahead with that specific infographic. So you're going to have to tell me what technology you're going to use, what your topic is going to be, or what your specific message is going to be, how you're appealing to your audience, what your kind of color scheme is going to be, what data you're going to use, what information you're going to use. It's a pretty short proposal. It's 2 pages, single space, like in relation to the proposals that you'll see in the Markel textbook. But I wanted you guys to engage in the proposal genre, to think about how technical documentation can be persuasive, because you have to persuade someone that you're capable of doing this. So you ultimately have to persuade me that you know enough about the topic that you are going to create an effective infographic, and you have a good enough sense about what's required in that deliverable, in the creation of an infographic through the proposal. So that's the first part. Second part is you're going to have to create an infographic. I suggest most of you use Easel, EASEL.ly. That is the website. There's a variety of other ones. If you just Google and make an infographic, it'll show up. So you have to create an infographic. So let's talk about infographics. What I want to do is, for the last part of this video, talk about what makes a good infographic, what are the components of an infographic that you'll have to take into consideration, what are some do's and what are some don'ts. So just really briefly, just to kind of give you some examples, and just so we can kind of integrate some visuals, and so you can stop looking at my face and actually look at infographics. So what you'll see here is an infographic about what makes a good infographic. Pretty simple. It's a Venn diagram. It's a very complicated Venn diagram, but it is. And you'll see it has 4 points: data, design, story, and shareability. These are the 4 pillars of a good infographic, because if you include any one of those on their own, let's say it's just data, it's just a Microsoft Word table or an Excel spreadsheet, that's not good, because it's not engaging through design. And even if you have data and design, that's not good either, because if it doesn't have a story, you're not going to connect. And if it's not shareable, then that means you can't easily transfer that information to another person. So there's these kind of 4 pillars of it. And I kind of want to go through some samples and show how these kind of manifest themselves. So the first example is this. This is these are pie charts, and they're communicating information about science in a way that is accurate. They're using appropriate colors. They have the percentages down. The pie charts add up to 100. It's all very good. But if you were to see this on its own, this is not a viable infographic in terms of something that engages someone, because it has no context. Right? What is the larger issue here? What is the larger issue of this visual? Now you could place this visual and augment it in a larger textual proposal, and this is part of one of the websites, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation website, that you'll have to skim through for this week through Blackboard. But this visual in and of itself, while having data, has no context. So again, you go back to the 4 pillars. Good data doesn't mean anything if you don't attach it to a story, to a context. And the same is true with this one as well. Right? This is a next step up. This is part of that Chesapeake Bay Foundation article as well. This is far more engaging. It uses creative aspects that you'll actually be able to use with Easel or another one like that, another infographic technology. But again, it's lacking a story. It's lacking a sense of consequence. So it breaks it down. It's very engaging. There's more visual components to it, as you can see, but there's no story behind it. And that's the thing about infographics is they're not just things that augment or that add to a text, right? They're kind of standalone artifacts that include the entire story, the entire context, all the data in one JPEG image that can then be shareable, right? That's the challenge with an infographic is if you include this visual as part of a larger story, then that makes sense because the big, see figure 1 about how this breaks down here, and then you can explain the context later, textually. But that's the challenge with the infographic is you have to have all 4 so you can be easily shareable. Because if you have to attach a 2-page document to describe the so what, then it's not easily shareable because you're not going to attach a Word document with the visual. This one is very good because it has a visual, it locates it, it has personal relevance to it. When you include a map, right, that allows people to place themselves in that specific situation. They could say, oh, I live right there, I live right there. It's providing a sense of relevance. It's providing a sense of engagement because you're locating someone. So they can either judge whether this topic is relevant or irrelevant based upon where they are on the map. So I live nowhere close to this. This is irrelevant for me, for example. Or wow, I live 2 miles away from this river. That's more relevant to me, etc., etc. So having a map, for example, or some sort of geographical marker can help add context, can help add with engagement. This one is more in terms of the dead zones that we're talking about. These next 2 are about the dead zones, specifically in the Gulf of Mexico. This one is very complex. I'm not really sure I'm going to expect this type of infographic from you guys because this is just articulating a scientific process, right? So this is also something you don't want to do is you don't want to just explain the scientific process about how nitrogen goes into the water and kind of what have this, the nitrogen cycle, if you will. The Haber-Bosch nitrogen cycle that Hager brings up in chapter 22. Explaining that cycle isn't enough. Again, going back to the first infographic and the second infographic, so what, right? So this is very aesthetically pleasing and probably beyond what I'm expecting in terms of technical skill because it's explaining scientific process and it's using kind of 3-dimensional shapes and all that stuff. But you can have a really nice picture like this, but if it's not providing the context of the story, then it's a bit lacking. And then same with this one. This one has a more specific point. As you can see, what they're trying to do is trying to articulate if the effect of the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill had any effect on the dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico from fixed nitrogen pollution, and they're trying to argue that specific point. So the strength of this one is it's very focused, and it outlines what it's trying to show. Right? It's almost like an argument. Did the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill have any impact on the dead zones? No, it didn't. Here's how. So that's why I shared this one, because it's more specific in terms of it's not just nitrogen and pollution. It's a very specific argument being made. Now I want to provide 2 more that are in a different context, which is gun violence, because you see a lot of those being shared more so than environmentalism. Because, as I said in the assignment description, some people don't care about a lot of environmental topics because there's just so much else to worry about, whether the terrorism, the economy, education, gun violence, etc. There are so many what people deem to be more personally relevant or urgent social ills right now that the environment kind of takes the back burner, which is sad because the environment will eventually have a big impact on all those things, such as education and the economy, to be sure. It's because it's a complex relationship, and thinking of the oil industry specifically, good for the economy, bad for the environment. So I wanted to show you some ones from another topic, and I would encourage you to kind of go to Google and type in specific topic, infographic, homelessness, infographic, the economy, infographic, etc., just to kind of get some ideas, because that's how you write a paper, is to look at models, and sometimes that's true with visuals as well. So this one is, the reason I share this is not because of the message, it's because, first of all, if you read it, it actually doesn't make any sense. There's no real argument there. It just says America has a small part of the world's population and almost half the guns, and that's fine. But if it's about gun violence, then that doesn't really matter, because you can have half the guns and not be violent, for example. So the point being made is kind of lost. The reason I showed it is because they got creative, because they're actually using the text as the shape of the gun here, as you can see that. So I thought that was pretty fun. That was pretty cool to integrate. And they also added humans in there for no reason. As you can see, the humans here, I think they're trying to add a humanistic element to it. They're trying to add a more relatable element to it, but it's completely decontextualized. They just put the people there for the sake of putting the people there. Now this gun one, it goes up and down. It's a long poster. As you can see, I'm just going to kind of scroll through. It's providing a lot of statistics about red states, blue states, about the amount of people killed, etc., etc. What this one lacks, of course, is no context of numbers. So if you say 10,000 people die by guns every year, right? The immediate counter argument to that is, well, 20,000 people die in car accidents, for example. There's no context in numbers, right? If you say, 10,000 of this, right, is only meaningful if it's in relation to other numbers, so it's lacking context. I want to go through 4 what not to do's next, because that's always fun, looking at failed attempts at an infographic. This one is complex. I'm sure it's accurate in the sense of the information being presented. I'm sure it is communicating everything that they want to communicate, but that's the problem, is you have to draw a line in terms of what you want to communicate. And when you guys are going with your infographics for this project, it's a big topic. You have pollution, you have environmentalism, you have understanding the nitrogen cycle, you have issues of farming and agriculture. Where do you draw the line? And that's going to be your challenge, is how much information do you deem to be too much information for a lay audience? This person struggled with that concept. This one is just wrong because, well, the percentages are correct. 25.5 and 74.5 add up to 100. But the size isn't really relevant. So here the numbers don't match the size. So one would expect the bigger the thing, the higher the percentage is, right? But here they screwed it up. So the design is contradicting the numbers, which you definitely don't want to do. This next one is just funny because if you look at the body parts that are associated with each aspect, they don't match up whatsoever. Especially if you look in the belt region, I don't understand, or the feet. There's no correlation between the body and the information here whatsoever. Maybe there's some metaphorical stuff like leadership at the top, but that's an example of when just because it's something cool and you can do it doesn't mean you should. And then this last one is a classic example of making sure that you choose the right chart or choose the right way to depict information for the type of information you have. So obviously pie charts have to add up to 100, and this one does not. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the right type of visualization for the information you have. So if we return to what makes a good infographic, data, design, story, shareability, you'll see that you have to have all 4 of these. You have to have accurate data, otherwise people aren't going to believe you. You have to have effective design because you want to be engaging. You have to have a story because you want someone to relate to it, because without relevance, people aren't convinced. And you have to have shareability. That is, you can't provide context in a supplemental Word document where you give them, oh, also read this essay with the infographic. You want to make it so that people can just see the image and get all the information that they need to know. So that's tough to do. So I would encourage you to skim through all the readings on Blackboard. Most of them are just there for infographics, but there's also a really good one about 11 mistakes not to make when constructing an infographic, and that one is pretty important in terms of making sure that you're going through the proper processes to create an infographic. So let me know if you have any questions. Be sure to get your proposal to me before or onto April 7th by midnight. Otherwise, there's no guarantee that you'll get feedback on me about whether or not I think it's a good idea for an infographic. So you can send it to me earlier than April 7th. I would actually welcome that. It's probably better to get your proposal out of the way quicker. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with.